Hi, today I'm joined by retired Command Sergeant Major Mike Burke, a 23-year U.S. Army veteran with 14 deployments, including 16 years in special operations with the 75th Ranger Regiment. He's the founder of Always in Pursuit, a leadership platform and podcast focused on resilience, mindset, and unlocking human potential. Thank you for joining, sir. It's an honor, and I'll let you introduce yourself and get deeper into your background.
Hey, I appreciate it, Danny. No, you hit most of the high points there. The only thing I would add is I also run a podcast called Legends of the 75th, which is focused on similar things. The only difference being is we focus on a demographic of individuals that served in the 75th Ranger Regiment, or kind of staples within that organization. And we're expanding operations outside of the podcast, and also doing short form and long form movies as well.
Sounds fantastic. Well, to give a better idea on your background and your service in the military, could you talk a little bit more about your service? I mentioned that you were in the U.S. Army for 23 years, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I joined the Army in 1998, straight out of high school. Realized that I wanted to do more and be more. I didn't want to kind of settle for mediocrity, or what a lot of kids do. From a small hometown. That's where I'm from. I'm originally from Cindy, Montana, and the military seemed like the best option to achieve that. Also, additionally, college wasn't really an option. There was no way to kind of afford that, so again, the military was a great option because they would pay for college. So joined in 98, went quickly through the pipeline, basic, AIT, airborne school, RIP is what it was called back in the day, Ranger Indoctrination Program. And then now it's called RASP, Ranger Assessment and Selection Program. And quickly got assigned to 275 up at JBLM, Fort Lewis, Washington. For many of the people that might not know where that is, it's right on the coast, about an hour south of Seattle. Served there for 3 years. Definitely, kind of had a mixed bag of leadership, but very quickly, got an amazing leader that came in, Master Sergeant Josh Wheeler, who's definitely somebody that was pivotal in my career as far as a leader, as far as the Rangers, and also being a man. September 11th happened, and it was off to the races. Was a team leader, squad leader for the first couple deployments. Went over to Afghanistan in 2002 for the first time. Was part of the invasion for Iraq in 2003. Winter Surge, Spring Surge, which were some of the major deployments we did over there in Afghanistan, hunting the Taliban. And, was there for when the 75th probably made the largest transitional movement that it had. Went from airfield seizures kind of being the primary mission, or large scale raids at the company or higher level, to direct action, strike forces operating at the platoon level, so we could pressurize the network. And was through that as a squad leader and as a platoon sergeant until 2000, almost 2010, when I left. And I went to teach ROTC for a couple years up at the University of Washington, Seattle, which was an amazing experience, and really got to have a great time with those cadets, training the future officers of the Army. Came back to 275, where I did some staff time as a master sergeant, and then eventually was a first sergeant, Charlie Company 275. Left 275, went to the Sergeant Major Academy down at Fort Bliss, Texas, and was selected on something we call the Command Select List. And went over to 2nd Cavalry Regiment in Germany, where I served as a squadron CSM for a striker squadron, and then was activated on the alternate list to become the regimental sergeant major of 2nd Cavalry Regiment as the 33rd sergeant major. Again, amazing mission, amazing unit, right on there on the front edge, as we've seen what's happening in Europe. They are, and also, back then we're also preparing, for what was eventually, inevitably going to happen with the Russians and, some of the adversaries over there. I left there after about 4 years over in Germany and went to 1st Security Forces Assistance Brigade, where I was a brigade sergeant major there, and our primary AOR, area of operation and responsibility, was South America. So spent a lot of time in, Honduras, Panama, Colombia, and a couple other contingency missions, in other countries down there. and had a great time, advising at the strategy level for senior leaders, not only from in their militaries, cross branches, but then also, consulates and, SMAs and, ambassadors and everything else. But ultimately decided it was to move on, time to move on after almost 24 years, well, almost 25 actually, and retired in March of 2023. So that's a soup to nuts, very quick version of my military career.
Awesome. Thank you a lot for sharing. So you're still, do you think you're still transitioning, or have you moved on from the military and you're completely in this new civilian life mode?
Well, I think for anybody, you always got to kind of take things in perspective on how long you served. If you served 4 years, then what does it take? 8 years, 12 years to make the transition? I don't know. I don't think anybody has the math behind that. But I will say that it's a journey. It's not necessarily a destination. There's definitely days. I'll give you an example. Today, literally, probably 50 minutes ago, I was standing around washing dishes, and my wife was like, you don't have to wash dishes. You just got home from a long day of work. And I'm like, it's not like I was doing anything anyway. It's not like I was running and gunning. I was just standing behind the desk all damn day. And then, I let out like a big sigh, and she's like, what's up? And I was like, just remembering that I'm not a badass anymore. I just, stand behind the desk and, do certain things. So, I don't think there's necessarily a point where you're like, okay, I'm assimilated to the civilian world. I think, it's something that's going to take time, and you just got to be okay with that. You got to be comfortable with that. And there's going to be frustration points. There's going to be, moments where you miss it, you miss the people, and you miss the missions. And, you just got to go, okay, but this is my new reality, and I just got to make the most of it.
So what's your current full-time job? Is it the VP of App Support at Mainstream Street Auto?
Yeah, so I'm the senior VP of operational strategic support for Main Street Auto, and then the chief of staff for Northern Rock, which is a holding company. That's my primary job right now for that company. But obviously, I have a lot of other things going on as well.
So tell me about your podcast, your movement, your other projects that you're working on.
Yeah, so I started, as you highlighted, and I appreciate you doing that. Always in Pursuit is a podcast that I started when I left, actually Germany, because we had a podcast over there that was called Kill Tank Radio that was actually a DoD production. It was a great time. I had, but that was kind of my introduction to podcasting. Left that, left the unit, and so many people were, hey, like, you gonna start another podcast? And I kind of tossed around the idea for a while. Thought about doing another DoD one with like First SVAB, but I was like, no, if I'm gonna do one, I want to do it on my own. I want to be able to talk to people I want to talk to and do it in a way that I want to do it. So we started Always in Pursuit. And, just like you talked about, it was about success principles, leadership, entrepreneurship. We talked to military leaders as well. And it was really a phenomenal time. We had a blog associated with it, a newsletter associated with it. We had multiple contributors. We even had a co-host, that would host episodes as well. And it was a lot of fun, but something kept on happening. Every time I'd have somebody from the 75th Ranger Regiment on, I would get inundated with emails and messages, and people would be like, hey, you really, really need to have this Ranger on it, with advice and kind of mentorship and working with some other people. They were like, you needed to start a podcast focused on Rangers. And so that was kind of the genesis of the idea behind the Legends of the 75th podcast. And like most things do, after about 2.5 years, almost 3 years of doing the podcast, I got approached with an opportunity to go over with 22 other Rangers, spanning all the way back from the Grenada conflict. And we went over to the Philippines to basically pay homage, do a historical recount of 6 Ranger battalions' actions in World War II, where they rescued 500 prisoners of war from the Kwanatan camp there. We, decided, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to take all these people over there. We need to do it in the right way. So we hired an entire film production crew to go over there with us. So we have the entire story on film. And we're in post-production. We still have a couple other things that we need to shoot in order to make that film complete, but we plan on releasing that in 2026. And obviously, like most people, if I don't know something, I'm gonna start digging into it. So I don't know anything about being the executive producer for a film. So I've been, spending the last 9 months learning and reaching out to people and really, really trying to understand the industry and what it takes to do this stuff. And of course, when you do that, other opportunities present themselves. So we've already done, we just finished up one for the Best Ranger competition, collaborating with Vet TV. To cover that event and talk about the culture and the climate of that competition itself, but then also the 75th Ranger Regiment, who's won that competition the last 5 years in a row. And, there's a couple other projects in the work as well. So it's really kind of the new direction we're going. It's not that we're going to stop the podcast for Legends. We're going to keep on doing those because they're amazing. Every single one of them is just, truly, truly remarkable. And the guests that we have on, I enjoy sitting down with them. It's, for myself, it's gratifying, just like you, doing podcasts. If, even if no one else listens, you get a lot out of that. But we're also going to add to it because part of our mission and part of our charter is to capture and preserve Ranger history. So we also need to talk about all these actions and these conflicts that Rangers have done throughout history.
Yeah, that definitely sounds very interesting, and I'll leave all of the links to everything you do in the description. So if you're listening to this episode, you can check Mike's work there. Definitely something worth checking out. One of the slogans, or probably one of your principles that you put on the website, is "Live life on the offense." What's the story behind that?
Living life on the offense, that's actually like a part of a whole like kind of mentality that I've had this thing that I've observed through life. And it's not just people in the military, it's people out of the military, that a lot of people are just kind of following through life hoping not to hit anything on the way down. And I want to live my life the opposite of that. It's not that I want to necessarily be offensive or an aggressive person, but you got one life to live. And you don't know what tomorrow brings. You don't know what's going to happen. So you've got to create opportunity. I look at a lot of things and people will say, "Oh, that person's lucky." I don't believe in luck. I believe it's where opportunity and preparedness meet. And that's what luck is. And so I'm going to constantly live my life in a way that I'm pursuing everything that I can possibly pursue in the bandwidth. I'm going to extend my bandwidth as far as I possibly can, so that I can leverage any opportunity, not only for myself, for my family, for my colleagues, for other people that are important in my life. This isn't about me. This isn't about Mike Burke. This is about, the community of people that are, immediately in my life, that are my family, but then also people that have helped me along the way. I want to help and, encourage and support as many people as I possibly can in this life. Because, when you're gone and you're gone from this world, what do you want to be remembered for? And I just want to be remembered for, that people are like, man, that guy, he really, really put it all out there. And, there was nothing he wasn't willing to do for anybody to kind of help them succeed. Because, success is cool. That's awesome. But personally, I think the most rewarding thing in this world is when you watch other people succeed and that you were maybe a little bit, you might even be on a small bit, part of their journey.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And I personally also resonate with this idea of being proactive. And this is one of the topics in the Jocko's book on leadership and the dichotomy of leadership. He um, or life. One of them, they mentioned this dichotomy between being aggressive and reckless. You don't want to be reckless, but you still want to be aggressive and proactive. And this is definitely something that, like, I totally agree with. As you said, not all the people pursue opportunities, but this is definitely something that allows you to live a better life and find something better for yourself and for people you care about. You mentioned a few times leadership, and I want to learn about your perspective on leading and your philosophy and how it evolved over the years uh, during your service in the U.S. Army.
Leadership, I definitely tried to overcomplicate it, and I wasn't the greatest leader when I was younger. In fact, if you reached out to people that maybe knew me when I was, specialist or corporal or, even young Sergeant Burke, they probably would be like, that guy was kind of aggressive and kind of a jerk. But, as time went on, you develop and you have different influences in your life. And what I realized, very early on is the most impactful leader, as I already mentioned him, Josh Wheeler. What stood him apart was two different factors. One, he never asked anybody to do what he wasn't willing to do. He was willing to lead by personal example. And he wasn't, there was no kind of double standard. He wasn't going to say one thing and then do something different. And he sure in the heck, even if he did have slip ups, which he did, he wasn't going to crucify somebody if they had the same thing. Hey, mistakes happen. That's okay. I've made my own mistakes. You've witnessed them. Let's move from here. This is not a, career-ending kind of point. It's more of a lesson learned, and this can help you throughout your life. So that was, kind of point one. Leading by personal example, and then two was caring. Like, you need to know about the people that you lead. You need to know what drives them. You need to know their why, as Simon Sinek says. I think there's a little bit more than what kind of Simon Sinek's talking about, in some of his stuff, but like, you need to know what intrinsically motivates them, and then also what extrinsically motivates them as well. And you need to make that part of your repertoire as a leader, because there's going to be points through that person's life where they're going to need, a kick in the pants. They're going to need some motivation, whatever it might be. And you need to be able to draw from your substantial knowledge of that individual and what drives and motivates them and moves them forward. But then also at the same time, through that, you might find that, whatever career field you're in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the military, but your knowledge of that individual, you might be able to sit down and say, hey, listen, I love you. You're phenomenal. But this just isn't the right fit for you. And, based on what I know about you, I think we need to maybe kind of explore some other options. And it's a difficult conversation to have. But what I've found is having that conversation when it comes from a position where they know that you really, really, truly care about them as a human being, and you're not just treat them as capital of some kind. They usually appreciate that. They might not appreciate it at the time, but they will appreciate it long term. And, there's a lot of people throughout my life that I've had that really, really hard conversation with them. And, there might have been years where they didn't talk to me. But most of the time they've come back and they've reached out and they said, you were 100% right. I hated you. I wanted to, slash all your tires and start your truck on fire. But I've realized through time that you were 100% right. And I realize how much you care now. And, I'm so thankful for it, because my life went a different direction in the direction it was supposed to go. So those are two of the primary fundamentals. If I had to throw a third one in, is don't overcomplicate it. If you're ever wondering what you need to do as a leader, just ask yourself the simple question, what would I want somebody to do in this situation? And then go from there.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing these principles. Definitely very valuable. Another aspect close to leadership is how you deal with uncertainty, especially in high stakes environment. Under pressure, you have to make decisions, you have to lead people, either it's whether it's combat or anything else, where the outcome of your decisions may put someone's life at risk or something else major. How do you keep your composure and make the right decisions in those moments?
Lots of practice. And what I mean is, Brandon Young and Blaine Smith, who wrote a book called Applied Leadership, or I'm sorry, that they run a company called Applied Leadership. Their book's called Perseverance Over Endurance. And, one of the things that they talk about a lot in that book is uncertainty. And what you need to realize is that uncertainty is going to happen. It's all about your mindset. It's also about your preparation. So you talked about, dire situations, situations where people's lives are on the line. You can't expect to rise to the occasion. You're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall to a level of your conditioning and training, and whatever that might be. In a dire situation, if you've never been in a fist fight and all of a sudden, some 6'2", MMA fighter comes up to you and now he wants to fight you, it's not going to go like in the movies where all of a sudden you're going to be, Jet Li, and you're just, karate kick this guy, and you're going to take this guy out. If you don't have any training, you're going to get your ass kicked. So the point kind of being is that you've got to train that stuff, and uncertainty can exist in a lot of different ways. So you don't know how it's going to come. You don't know what shape it's going to come. In the military, it's a little bit easier. We kind of know how that's going to happen, in combat situations, but even in training situations, we can kind of define that within a degree. But in life, you don't know how that's going to come. So my point is you've got to hunt adversity. You've got to hunt uncertainty. You've got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you can grow, because what you'll do is you'll create a new normal, and you'll go, okay, I was completely petrified of whatever it is. Okay. You name it, whatever kind of uncertainty it might have been. Maybe it was standing in front of people talking. Maybe that type of uncertainty, because you don't know how they're going to react, makes you extremely uncomfortable, and maybe it makes you physically ill. But the first time you do it, even if it goes badly, you're going to go, I didn't die. That wasn't the end of the world. Okay. It could have went better. It probably should have. But I've created a new normal. Now I know what at least that feels like and what that anxiety feels like. So now I need to do it again. And I just need to keep on doing it until I get comfortable. Okay. And, so you can just apply that in any way of your life. And, I don't know necessarily what your audience is. I don't know if it's men or if it's women, but, the thing I will say is that, crazy things happen in this world, and everybody needs to prepare for them, because no one expects to be in a dire situation. But here's what I will tell you: whether you're a mother or a father or a brother or a sister, okay, or a son or a daughter, when your family members' lives are on the line, you're going to want to be able to respond and handle those situations in a calm demeanor. And you're not going to be able to do it if you haven't had challenges and adversity in your life, and you haven't put yourself into positions where you know what that feels like. Because the reason that guys or gals that, in absolutely just catastrophic situations can maintain their cool is because they've been through similar situations, or they've had that before, and they know that freaking out and acting like a spaz and screaming and yelling or whatever it might be is not going to help the situation. In a complicated, dire situation, look for the person that's maintaining their cool, because that's the person that's going to respond in kind and help everybody else through that situation. So if you do find yourself in that situation, look for that person, because they're going to probably help you, and they're going to be the one that's thinking through things logically instead of emotionally.
Yeah. Amazing advice. Basically, to recap, to be prepared for dire situations, uncertainty. You want to have practice, and to have practice in life. Well, in the military, it's more about training, but in life, it's more about living through uncertainty or situations like that give you that kind of training. Awesome. I like this quote that you put on your LinkedIn. It goes, "I'm pretty simple in my beliefs. Whatever you touch, live it better than you received it." Could you elaborate a little bit more on this quote?
Yeah, I think the world would be a better place if everybody might maintain that mindset. It doesn't matter. It could be somebody on the elevator, and you see that person, maybe distracted or in their own thoughts, or whatever, and you just say, hey, how's your day going? And you just have a conversation with that person, or, hey, I really like your shoes, or you're just nice to them. You're just nice to that person. And it's a 20-second ride on an elevator to the 25th floor, or whatever you're doing. But when you step off that elevator, that person, I don't know, maybe they don't appreciate it. Maybe they just wanted you to shut the hell up. But you don't know. So you left that situation better than you found it. You stepped into that situation. But it can be large scale too. I mean, you just need to constantly be improving the world around you, whether it's work, whether it's your own house, whether it's yourself. You should be constantly a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. And you got to find ways, and you have to have structure in order to do that. Because if you're not doing that, then what are you doing? Like, what's the point, And it doesn't have to be some grandiose thing. It can be very, very small things. Like right now, for example, I'm just, and it's something I've done in the past, but, I'm trying to increase my vocabulary, so I'm picking up audiobooks and, doing some different things so that I have a better, better vocabulary, because I spend a lot of time in front of cameras. I spend a lot of time on podcasts. So, I want to make sure I'm the best version that I can possibly be for the audience that's listening. And I got a vocabulary that's rich and also engaging, and it keeps people involved.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for going over that. And the last topic would be advice for young guys and girls in their 20s. What would you tell them?
You don't deserve anything in this world, and you shouldn't expect anything in this world. The world is a place that if you walk through it thinking that you're going to get something, and you should be entitled to something, you're gonna have some stark realizations. Everything in this world needs to be earned. Everything in this world takes a lot of effort, and it's only going to get more difficult as time goes on, and responsibilities are thrown on your shoulder. So just go ahead and realize that, and stop waiting for somebody to save you, or waiting for some magical moment, and just get out there and get to work. Whatever that is, whatever that means, do it, because we have this false kind of belief that because of social media and some of this stuff that we see out there, that these people can just have TikTok accounts or YouTube channels or whatever it might be, or even podcasts, and they're just that with minimal work, they're are just trying to be funny on film or whatever it is, that they're gonna have these grandiose lives. And the truth is if you actually peek behind the curtain and you actually knew how most of those people made from that kind of stuff, you'd realize it's nothing. It's definitely not survivable. The people that actually make significant amounts of money, that are these influencers or whatever they might be out there, it's because they have another business and they're busting their butts working that. I was watching this one about a gal, and she was, she got millions of followers probably tens of millions of followers between all these different platforms. And she was running through the numbers of, she just was being 100% transparent. She's like, here's how much I make from this platform, this platform, this platform. She's like, that's not even going to pay for the truck that everybody's oogling and googling over the, she's like, this money that I make, that I afford this house and afford all the fancy toys I have, is because I have a business. And she's like, and I've been building that business for 9 years. This social media stuff, it's just a marketing thing, but it actually doesn't make us some money. What makes us some money is the business. And I thought that was just kind of a real demonstration of that. But it's not that there's anything wrong with the current generation or young people nowadays. It's just, it's in their face, and everybody's got a phone. So they just think that stuff comes easy, and it doesn't. Hard work is going to beat talent when talent won't work hard. John Maxwell quote for you there. Actually, John Wooden. That's John Wooden. John Wooden still, or John Maxwell's, you quoted it from John Wooden all the time. And I truly just believe that. I don't have a lot of talent in this world, but I will tell you this: I will work anybody out. I will outwork anybody in this world, and that's really truly what I've been doing. Most all my life, definitely ever since I got my first job.
Thank you for the honest advice. Mike, it was my pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you for sharing your stories and your perspectives on many different topics. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It was an honor.
Thank you.